So you've had an Oreo and you may have even had a double stuff Oreo, but have you had 3, 4, 5 times the amount of stuff per usual? Probably not, and that's because Nabisco or whatever company makes Oreos, I don't know, they're not gonna release it, okay? So it's on us to make an Oreo with a procedural amount of stuff, meaning I'm gonna make an Oreo in this tutorial completely out of math so that we can make any size of Oreo and all this. In this tutorial, you're gonna learn how to do the procedural workflow for modeling with geometry nodes, how to do, the shading and make materials for this, and also how to have a good time while watching a tutorial. This is important as well. The only thing you're gonna need for this video before we begin is I have this image downloaded of the Oreo design. We're not gonna make it ourselves, so just find it on Google Images. But once you have that, we are ready to start the creamiest tutorial on the internet. Okay, we're in Blender. Let's make an Oreo. So it's not a cube, it's more of like a cylinder shape. So we're gonna make some geometry that's close to the Oreo and then send it through geometry nodes and do the rest of the work. So cube, get rid of it. Instead, let's use either a cylinder or you know what might even be better, I'm thinking. Let's use a circle. So we're gonna make one cookie part of the Oreo, and then we're gonna flip it, and then we're gonna do the cream. So for the circle, let's do 100 vertices so it's nice and smooth. Edit mode, F to fill in, and what I wanna do is give this extra geometry, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna displace this relative to the texture that I told you to download. So I for inset, and just keep doing this. I'm sure there's a command for it, but heck if I know what it is. So we're doing it the old-fashioned way. This is what the cavemen used to do before Elon Musk came around and came up with a keyboard shortcut. So I just inset a bunch of times. For the final one, you could run a poke faces command. So F3 or spacebar, type in, I already did, poke faces. And it's just gonna add in these triangles. Okay, you have a circle, beautiful. Go to geometry nodes. Now let's do the interesting part. So the question is, now that we have a GeoNodes group, what nodes do we put between here and here, input and output, to give us the Oreo? Well, we know we have this image texture that we probably want to make use of, so I'm going to import in an image texture. Which one? The one that gives us the Oreo design. Where even is it? There it is. And we want to somehow use this data to extrude or move this information upwards. Here's how you do that. Whenever we want to move points, we're going to reset their position, right? That's literally what we're doing. We're moving their position, so I need a node to reset that. With a set position, what we can do is we can offset. So I'm saying take the vertices and offset, move them by, well, we want it to be on the z-axis. So I'm going to separate this into a combine x, y, z. Separate and combine in one sentence, whatever. Meaning that if I can control this z independently, I can have a function for that, right? What function is it going to be? It's going to be the image texture. In fact, we can just use the alpha. And you can see, if you almost look at it from the top view, you can almost see we have like 4 cookies. We're getting closer. So what's the issue here? Well, first of all, the issue is this is way too powerful of an effect. So I want everything that's being modified into the z to be multiplied by a small number. So it's just not as intense. And by the way, to get more resolution, you could either add more geometry or just use a subdivide node. And as we add this, you can almost start to see the Oreo logo and the rim. And really, there are 4 cookies here, meaning the image texture has somehow been mapped in this weird way where like the image is kind of the size of this square and the corner's right in the middle, and then it starts tiling. Whereas what we want is this to be the entire image, right? So we somehow need to remap this. Again, please, Blender, how do I undo annotations? Here's how we're going to do it. So the vector slot in the image texture node, what it does is it tells us where do we put the image, okay? So right now, by default, it's using position field. If I do nothing, then, nothing changes, right? But if we modify this position, we can get this to change. So first of all, let's shift the center of this, which right now is here, to be in the bottom right corner, okay? To do that, I'm going to use vector math. So I'm modifying the position coordinates, and I'm shifting them by half a unit on the x-axis, because it's 1 unit for the full image, and then half a unit on the y-axis. Or you could do a positive unit. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to do minus 0.5 and 0.5. You could do it positive. Doesn't matter. Next thing I want to do is, now that this is centered in some sense, really the center is in the bottom right corner, but don't worry about that, is we want to scale up the image by a factor of 2. Because it just so happens the image is half the size that we need it to be. You might think, okay, take this, take a scale it by 2, or rather, it would be the reciprocal, so you can already see the issue. It would be a half. But you can see it kind of does this weird thing where it's not centered. Order of operations matters here. We want to scale the image, then shift it. So I'm going to scale. And if we do this before the translation, you can now see it stays centered. So it's not actually going to be exactly half because I want this rim to really just touch the thing. And we could pick a number that does that for us. So something like this, you can modify it later. But this isn't just like an image we're projecting. It's actually like a 3D mesh now. Because again, we are setting position relative to this. Actually, I'm going to make the image just a bit smaller so that we do kind of get the end of the rim here. So it kind of flans out at the end. Reason being, I want to give this thickness because right now it's just kind of like a piece of paper that we extruded upwards. But you can see cool results, right? This is kind of the most interesting part of the tutorial, I think, in terms of modeling. So again, we can add more divisions, whatever. Let's give this thing thickness. So before we even do this set position, whatever, I want to give this thing not a circular form, but a cylindrical form. We can do that with an extrude mesh, and we want to make sure individuals not selected so that it's just extruding everything together. This number is basically going to be the thickness of our cookie in some sense. So we extrude it, and then we want to say after the extrusion, take the faces up here, not the ones on the side, and for those, do the set position. So I take the ones on the top, connect it there, and let's see what that looks like. It did not seem to like that one bit. Why does it not seem to like that one bit? Let's see. Because it's not connected. Boom. Okay, so what do we have? We have the thing that was extruded, and then we said only take the faces on the top and then do this operation to them, which gives this thing thickness. It's still like not a sealed convex mesh, but we'll get there. Let me just adjust this one more time. Do I want it to be bigger or smaller? No, I want it to be a smaller number. There we go. So how do we kind of seal this? I mean, it doesn't matter if the cookie is that's a good point. If the cookie has cream and stuff, you're not actually going to see the underside of this. But for peace of mind, how do we seal this? Well, we already have the circular mesh. So if we just kind of join that back in, that'll be the end of it. So we take this, we join them, bada bing, bada boom, you got a cookie. Beautiful. So there is our the cookie part. And really for the other side of it, we just kind of duplicate it and flip it. We don't need to make two of these like from scratch. By the way, to get this to be a bit smoother, instead of just like abusing the subdivide mesh and like using a lot of geometry, I'm just going to bring it down by 1. And then after we kind of create this whole thing, which by the way, if it's not connected, because we have one extruded top side and one bottom side that we're just filling in, we could just merge by distance. But then we could add in a subsurf at the end, which will just add extra smoothing. And unlike the subdivide, it's not going to be as harsh. It's actually going to add smoothing to this, which I think looks pretty good. But you could even bring this up another level. It would just add quite a bit of geometry, like already 1 million polygons just for the top side. Okay, so here we have a thing. Let's make 2 of them. How do we make 2? I'm going to use a mesh line, which might seem like a weird choice, but follow with me. If we have a mesh line with 2 points, so here you can see a line with 1 vertex here and 1 vertex here, what we can do is we can position these in a good position, and then we'll say for each vertex, copy everything we made before, right? So let's have the start location. We can actually have it be a function of z, because again, I like the idea of having this be fully procedural as much as possible. So for the z, I'm going to have a number I can put in for both of these. Only difference is one of these is going to be multiplied by -1. Why? Why? Because as I increase this, you can see now this thing is centered, because this is going to be the height of the first point. So I'm saying go to 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. It's rising. And the other point is going in the other direction, times -1. So it's almost like a reflection about the xy plane. So we have 2 vertices such that when we now do the instance on points, hopefully you're following along, by the way. When we do the instancing on points for these points in this instance, you can now see we have 2 cookies that we can control the spacing of. And this isn't just the kind of distance between them. I mean, it literally is. But if we're adding cream in the middle, this is going to be the thickness of our cream as well, which is the thing we're going for, right? Okay. So what do we want to do? We want to flip the bottom one. Easy. These are a bunch of instances. So if I want to rotate them, I use a rotate instances node. Of course, I don't want to do it to both of these. I want to somehow isolate the bottom one. Well, if we have one instance here with index 0 and one instance here with index 1, because again, indexing starts at 0. So here you can see our two instances, 0 and 1. Because we know their indexes, I can just say, take the one with index 1 and only rotate that one. Okay, what did I even just say, right? You take the index, you say, give me the one that is equal to 1. So index equal to 1. This will be our selection for the rotation. So we're isolating it. And only for this one, do the rotation. So you can see that works. So first of all, we want to rotate about the x-axis by 180 degrees. This will make it so that they're both kind of inwards. And let's just kind of free rotate this so that they're not like perfectly synced up. Because actually, I need to look at an Oreo cookie. Maybe they are perfectly synced up. But in my mind, they probably randomized it just a bit. I don't know. So we have that. And that's going to be independent of our kind of stretch factor again. Because we have instances. Okay. Next order of operations, and kind of the easiest one, is let's make the cream. What is cream? It's just like a cylinder that we wedge in the middle. So I'm taking a cylinder. Here's what the cylinder looks like. Again, we have full procedural control of it, which is nice because the main thing we care about is the depth, right? And we already know what the depth should be. So I'm going to take everything. I'm going to join it with the cylinder. What is the depth? Well, it should be something dependent on the spacing that we have here. So I'm just going to connect it. And you can see it's almost correct, right? As we grow, so does the cylinder. But you can see, especially as we stretch it out, it's not enough. The way you want to think about this is what this number, the cookie separation number, actually means is it's saying take a vertex, move it up, and take another one and reflect it on the negative direction and move it down. Meaning the distance between the cookies isn't this number, right? Which tells us where to put the vertices. It's that times 2, because you have 2 vertices moving. So what do I mean? I mean, take this and then multiply it by 2. And this will give us the perfect depth number. Now, you could go a bit overkill or underkill, like you want it to be just a bit thinner so that there's a bit of a gap. You can do that, or you can go the other way. But that's the essence of it, right? And if we want this to now look good and curved without modeling it, because we're trying to do everything procedurally, let's just send it through a subdivision surface. Let's see what that looks like. So it's going to give us this broken mesh, because that's what happens when you subsurf a cylinder. It's like has a bunch of poke faces issues, as you can see. We can fix that. Just add some fill segments. You can see that already helped. If we add another level of subsurf, that looks pretty good. You could even add 3, but that might be overkill. So you could add fill segments. The more you add, the more like sharp this is going to look. And you can also add some segments on the side. So really what we're doing here is, if we look at this, is we're adding geometry along the rim and along the top. Okay. So let's see what we have so far. Now we have a nice rounded cream. And I think the only thing I want to change here is the radius by default is 1, which is the same as our circle that we started with for the cookie. I think usually it's a tiny bit smaller or bigger. I think it's smaller. So let's go for like 0.95. Nope, let's go for like 0.98. 2% smaller. I'm pretty happy with that. So I think at this point, you could do a couple more like modeling things. Like let me just do a couple just to make it look good. So for example, the cream is looking pretty sharp. So we want to make sure it's set shade smooth. Maybe the same for this. I mean, I don't know. You could do a whole bunch of stuff here. But beyond the modeling, which I think looks pretty good at this point. So let's just review what we have control over. This is the main one. This is our, and this is the goal. Now we have a Oreo of this thickness, right? And if it's looking a bit weird, you just add some more segments to kind of round out the cylinder. But now that we can have an Oreo of any thickness, you can also control things like the height of the cookie element, because maybe it should be a bit thicker as well. Remember, we have that extrusion. We can control the mapping, a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this. So let's move on to shading, which is super easy because one of the colors is white and one of the colors is brown, and that's it. So before we do that, let me just open up cycles and set up an HDRI. If you don't know what that is, consider going back to kindergarten, you fuck. An HDRI is a high dynamic range image, right? It's a spherical environment. So I'm just going to load one to get our lighting without actually using lights, so that when we have our materials, it will look good from the get-go. So we need two materials. One for the cream. So I'm going to set material and one for the cookies, which we can actually add before the instancing. Just to save a bit of memory, maybe. I don't know if that's how that works. Either way, two materials. One of them is going to be called cream, and load the cream material into the cream socket. And for the other one, let's do a cookie material and take the cookie material and put it into the cookie socket. There you go. Let's start off with the cream because it's actually almost done. So the cream is just like a BSDF, the default one. Make it fully white. That's it. That's what the cream looks like. Now for the cookie, and you can see we've isolated this with the set material, right? So again, everything we do here is being sent only to the cookie we generated. We want it to be brown, right? So we kind of take a yellowish, reddish, orangish thing, and then we drop the thing for it. And that looks roughly the correct color. If anything, it's a bit too saturated. It's a bit closer to black, to be honest. So we have something like that. And I know what you're thinking. Beautiful. No, you're thinking it looks too smooth. So what we can do, and this is kind of the main thing that will make it look like a cookie, is we can add some noise texture, right? Some randomness. And we're going to use that to drive a normal map, okay? In fact, to avoid any stretching issues, which I don't think there are any, but I'm just going to use object coordinates. And then we send this noise through a bump node, which converts it into normal information. Connect it, view it, now we're fucking, you know? What do we do to make it look better? Denser kind of things going on. So this really does kind of have a cookie feel to it. We do need to mess with the colors a bit. But let's increase if we zoom in here, let's increase the detail so it has a bit more going on. Maybe bump up the roughness so it's more like thoroughly distributed in some sense. And to make it look less flat, let's also have the noise affect the color in some sense. So we send this through a color ramp. So instead of this just being a single color, we'll have it be like black or brown. In fact, to see this, I'm just going to make this white. And I'm just going to clamp this color ramp so we can see both colors here. And I want it to mainly be brown with some white spots, as you can see. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that adds quite a bit of character to it. If anything, we can make it more intense. And this really gives it that cookies and cream look. And the rest of this, like what is the rest of this? It's like putting it in a realistic environment with the HDRI and some lighting. This is, again, the trick I always use. I just set up a corner to give it, you know, some surfaces for the light to bounce off of. But this is our Oreo. So again, I know I've said it a million times, but this is the point of the tutorial. We didn't just make an Oreo. We made an Oreo of any thickness. Let's make it thicker. Look at that. You could also add a function to keep it centered or to keep the thing not clipping through the floor. Not important here, but you can see now we have a thicky boy Oreo and we can control everything about it. Like, you know, the radius of the cream. Do you want it to be like a weird kind of like dumbbell? Oh, that's a good idea. The dumbbell Oreo. I'm going to have to remember that one. But you could do whatever you want with it. So I think that's kind of the essence of the tutorial. Like, as I always say, I've gotten you 95% of the way there. The last 5% is up to you for what you want to do. But we went for 20 minutes. So let me just talk about this now because I don't do it at the beginning or the middle because I don't want it to be intrusive. But Patreon, it exists. Okay. So what is Patreon? Why should you care? And why should you click that link in the description? Well, first of all, if you enjoyed these tutorials and the CG Matter videos and all that, they all funnel to one Patreon. And if you want to fund these free tutorials, they are free, let's be clear. And also the CG Matter videos, that is the way to do it. There's some 750 or 760 people that currently do so. You guys are the best. Why do they do it? Maybe because they want to, or there are 3 benefits you get as a patron. So let me tell you about them. 1, early access to tutorials. This Oreo tutorial is going to be uploaded not a day early, but multiple days early because I'm ahead of schedule. You could watch videos before they come out. That's one. That's the cheap. Just for $1, you can do that. The second tier, and this is the one that I imagine is the most valuable to most people, is the blend file tier. You can get project files, blend files. This Oreo, you don't need to make it yourself. You can just download the blend that I made. I'll clean it up so it doesn't look like a dumbbell. But you get the blend, and for any project I've worked on over the last 3 years that I've uploaded to Patreon, at which point there are hundreds, you get the project files, you get the blends, okay? So You don't just get this Oreo blend, you get hundreds for $5. And then finally, top tier is the exclusive tutorials. That's the tier where I have a couple, not too many, but I have a couple videos that are for patrons only. Those tend to go in depth or in kind of weird topics and stuff like that. I make them because that's, the top tier. I don't make too many because I want it to be available, most of the information for free on YouTube. That's the business model. And hopefully some people see value in that and they're like, oh, I want to donate. But there are some videos that are kind of paywalled off. If you're interested in those, I've uploaded a few, and you can watch all of those immediately once you join Patreon. So there's a link in the description. Check it out if you want to. And even if you don't, thank you for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you learned how to make an Oreo, a thick boy Oreo, and I'll see you next time.